The air hung thick with unspoken accusations, each glance from across the polished mahogany table a sharpened blade. The chandelier light, once a symbol of family gatherings, now felt like an interrogation lamp, highlighting the tremor in my hands as I reached for my water glass. My mother's voice, usually a comforting melody, sliced through the strained silence, each word laced with a venom I hadn't known she possessed. They had cornered me, baited me into this carefully orchestrated dinner, only to tear me down piece by piece, leaving me exposed and bleeding in the ruins of what I thought was my family. If you've ever felt betrayed by the people closest to you, subscribe now to hear stories of resilience and family secrets that will leave you speechless. I was 17, standing on the precipice of a life I believed was secure, loved, and meticulously planned. My future, as they saw it, was preordained: a prestigious university, a suitable marriage, and a life of quiet, unfulfilling luxury. But I had other plans, dreams whispered in the dead of night, fueled by a burning desire to create, to impact the world in ways they couldn't comprehend. My name is Paisley, and I was about to learn that my dreams were a threat, a rebellion against the carefully constructed facade of their perfect family. The dinner started innocently enough, a seemingly normal Sunday evening. My father, a man of few words, offered a curt nod as I took my seat. My brother, always quick with a sarcastic jab, made a comment about my artistic phase, a dismissive label for my passion for photography. But beneath the surface of their usual banter, I sensed a shift, a coldness that seeped into the room like a chilling draft. Then my mother began, her voice deceptively soft, inquiring about my college applications. I proudly announced my acceptance to a renowned art school, a place where I could hone my skills and pursue my dreams. The silence that followed was deafening. It was then that she uttered those words, words that would forever be etched into my memory, words that shattered the foundation of my world. "Paisley," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "you've always been the family mistake." The room spun. My carefully constructed world crumbled around me. I stared at her, my heart pounding in my chest, searching for any sign of remorse, any hint of a joke. But there was nothing, only cold, hard disapproval. My father remained silent, his gaze fixed on his plate, his silence a deafening endorsement of her cruelty. My brother smirked, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. They had planned this, orchestrated this moment to tear me down, to force me back into the mold they had created for me. Air in the room thinned, each breath a painful reminder of their betrayal. A mistake! The word echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of the perfect home they had meticulously crafted. I wanted to scream, to shatter the crystal glasses that lined the table, to disrupt the serene facade they presented to the world. But I couldn't. I was trapped, a bird in a gilded cage, my wings clipped before I even had a chance to fly. I managed to choke out, "But photography, it's my passion. It's what I'm good at." My mother scoffed, a dismissive sound that sent shards of ice through my veins. "Photography is a hobby, Paisley, not a career. It's frivolous, a waste of time and talent. You have a duty to this family to uphold our legacy." Legacy. It was always about the legacy. The family name, the social standing, the carefully curated image of perfection. My dreams were insignificant, a mere inconvenience in their grand plan. My father finally spoke, his voice a low rumble that brooked no argument. "We've already made arrangements for you to attend law school. It's a respectable profession, one that will ensure your future." Law school? My blood ran cold. The thought of spending my life confined within the sterile walls of a courtroom, arguing cases I didn't believe in, filled me with dread. It was their vision, not mine. They were trying to mold me into someone I wasn't, to extinguish the flame that burned within me. I tried to reason with them, to explain my aspirations, to make them understand that my happiness mattered. But my words fell on deaf ears. They had already made up their minds. I was nothing more than a disappointment, a rebellious daughter who dared to defy their expectations. As the days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted. The constant lectures, the subtle manipulations, the thinly veiled threats, they chipped away at my resolve, leaving me feeling isolated and suffocated. My brother joined in, his taunts becoming more frequent, more pointed. He reveled in my misery, enjoying the power he held over me. He would often leave brochures for law schools lying around or make snide comments about starving artists, always making sure to look me in the eye as he did. Sleepless nights became the norm, my mind racing with thoughts of escape. I tossed and turned, haunted by their words, their disapproval. The weight of their expectations pressed down on me, crushing my spirit. My room, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison cell. I tried to talk to my friends, to confide in them about my struggles, but they couldn't understand. They came from families who supported their dreams, who encouraged their passions. They couldn't comprehend the suffocating control my family exerted over me. I felt alone, adrift in a sea of despair. Desperate, I sought solace in my photography. I would sneak out at night, camera in hand, and wander the city streets, capturing the raw beauty and gritty reality that my parents refused to see. Through my lens, I found a voice, a way to express the emotions that I couldn't articulate. Each photograph was a silent rebellion, a testament to my unwavering spirit. But even my passion became a source of conflict. My parents discovered my late-night excursions and confiscated my camera, accusing me of being irresponsible and rebellious. They grounded me, restricting my movements, isolating me further from the outside world. They even threatened to cut off my allowance, leaving me financially dependent on them. They were determined to break me, to force me into submission. I felt like I was suffocating, slowly being erased. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, and the fire that once burned so brightly inside me began to flicker. I attempted to negotiate, to find a middle ground. I promised to take some business classes alongside my art courses, hoping to appease them, to show them that I was willing to compromise. But they wouldn't budge. It was their way or no way. My mother even went so far as to contact the art school, attempting to rescind my acceptance. She used her influence, her connections, to try to sabotage my future. I was horrified, heartbroken. How could the people who were supposed to love me, to support me, try so relentlessly to destroy my dreams? That's when I truly understood the depth of their betrayal. The person I believed would always be my champion had turned into my worst nightmare. I knew then that I had to fight back, that I couldn't let them control my life. The day they tried to end my spirit was the day I started planning my escape. The weight of their rejection was a physical burden, crushing the air from my lungs. I was trapped, suffocating in the gilded cage they had built for me. My dreams, my passions, my very identity were being systematically erased. One evening, after another particularly brutal lecture from my mother about my ungratefulness, I retreated to my room, the walls closing in around me. I sank to the floor, tears streaming down my face, the weight of their expectations pressing down on me, threatening to extinguish the last flicker of my spirit. I felt like a puppet, my strings controlled by their desires, my voice silenced by their disapproval. I looked around my room, once a sanctuary filled with art supplies and photographs, now a sterile prison stripped bare of anything that reflected my true self. My camera, the one object that had given me solace, was locked away in my father's study, a constant reminder of their power over me. I felt utterly helpless, completely defeated. The thought crossed my mind to just give up, to surrender to their demands, to become the person they wanted me to be. Maybe it would be easier that way, to avoid the constant conflict, to silence the dissenting voice within me. But even as the thought took root, a spark of defiance flickered within me. A memory surfaced, a photograph I had taken of a lone flower pushing its way through a crack in the pavement, a symbol of resilience, of the indomitable spirit of life. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of places, hope can still bloom. And with that memory, something shifted within me. The despair didn't vanish entirely, but it was tempered with a newfound resolve. I realized that surrendering was not an option. I couldn't let them extinguish my fire, erase my dreams. I had to fight back, not with anger or defiance, but with cunning and strategy. If they wanted to play a game, I would play too, but on my own terms. I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and looked around my room with new eyes. It was no longer a prison, but a command center, a place to strategize and plan my escape. The first step was to appear compliant, to lull them into a false sense of security. I would attend the meetings with the law school advisors, nod attentively during my mother's lectures, and offer no resistance to their plans. I would become the perfect daughter, the one they always wanted me to be, but it would be a facade, a mask to conceal my true intentions. While they were busy patting themselves on the back for saving me, I would be gathering information, collecting evidence, and formulating my plan. I started paying closer attention to their conversations, listening for any weaknesses, any vulnerabilities that I could exploit. I observed their interactions with each other, noting the subtle power dynamics, the unspoken resentments that simmered beneath the surface of their perfect facade. My brother, with his arrogance and his need for validation, became a particular focus of my attention. He craved their approval, constantly seeking their praise, and I knew that I could use that against him. I began to subtly manipulate him, playing on his insecurities, feeding his ego, slowly gaining his trust. I would ask him for advice about law school, feigning interest in his legal studies, and he would eagerly share his knowledge, oblivious to the fact that I was using him as a source of information. My parents, blinded by their own self-importance, never suspected a thing. They were so convinced that they had broken me that they didn't see the storm brewing beneath the surface. They had underestimated my resilience, my determination to reclaim my life. They thought they had won, but they were wrong. The game had just begun. I started documenting everything, every conversation, every manipulation, every act of betrayal. I knew that I would need proof if I was going to expose them, if I was going to shatter their perfect facade. I used a hidden voice recorder to capture their conversations, carefully transcribing their words, preserving their cruelty for posterity. I even managed to retrieve my camera from my father's study, secretly replacing it with a cheap substitute. Photography became my weapon, a way to capture their true selves, to expose the darkness that lurked beneath their polished exterior. The anger that had once consumed me was replaced by a cold, calculating determination. I was no longer a victim, but a strategist, a planner, a force to be reckoned with. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and they were about to pay the price. The day they thought they had broken me was the day they sealed their own fate. I became a ghost in my own home, a silent observer, meticulously documenting their every move. I smiled sweetly at my mother's pronouncements about my future, nodded attentively during my father's lectures on responsibility, and even feigned interest in my brother's endless legal jargon. They ate it up, convinced that they had finally broken my spirit. But beneath the surface, a plan was taking shape, a meticulously crafted strategy designed to expose their hypocrisy and reclaim my life. My photography, once a source of conflict, became my greatest weapon. I started taking pictures again, ostensibly for a photography club at school, but in reality, I was documenting their lives, their lies, their carefully constructed facade. I captured their forced smiles at social gatherings, their condescending glances at the hired help, their hushed arguments behind closed doors. Each photograph was a piece of the puzzle, a brick in the wall I was building to expose their true selves. The voice recorder became my constant companion. I hid it in my purse, in my room, even in the flower vase on the dining table, capturing their unguarded conversations, their callous remarks, their blatant disregard for anyone who didn't fit into their narrow world. I spent hours transcribing the recordings, meticulously documenting their words, their tone, their inflections. It was painstaking work, but I knew that it was essential. I needed irrefutable proof of their manipulation, their cruelty, their betrayal. One evening, I overheard my father on the phone discussing a shady business deal, a scheme to defraud investors out of their life savings. The details were vague, but I knew enough to understand that it was illegal, unethical, and potentially ruinous to the people involved. My blood ran cold. How could he, a man who preached about integrity and responsibility, engage in such blatant dishonesty? It was then that I realized the depth of their corruption, the extent to which they were willing to go to protect their wealth and their status. That conversation became the cornerstone of my plan. I knew that if I could expose his business dealings, I could bring their entire world crashing down. But I needed more information, concrete evidence that I could present to the authorities. I started researching corporate law, poring over legal documents, and seeking advice from a sympathetic family friend who worked as a paralegal. It was a crash course in legal maneuvering, but I was determined to learn everything I needed to know to bring my father to justice. My brother, still blissfully unaware of my true intentions, continued to be a valuable source of information. He would often boast about his father's business acumen, dropping hints about his deals, his investments, his strategies. I would listen attentively, feigning admiration while secretly piecing together the puzzle. He even showed me some confidential documents, carelessly leaving them lying around his room, confident that I wouldn't understand them. I carefully photographed each document, adding them to my growing collection of evidence. But there were close calls. One afternoon, my mother walked in on me while I was transcribing one of the recordings. I quickly slammed my laptop shut, pretending to be working on a school assignment. She eyed me suspiciously, her gaze lingering on my face, searching for any sign of deception. "What are you working on, Paisley?" she asked, her voice sharp, her eyes narrowed. "Just some research for my history class," I replied, my voice trembling slightly. She didn't believe me, I could see it in her eyes, but she didn't press the issue. "Just remember," she said, her voice dripping with menace, "we're doing this for your own good." As she walked away, I let out a shaky breath, my heart pounding in my chest. It was a stark reminder of the risks I was taking, the dangers that lurked beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect lives. I knew that I had to be more careful, more vigilant, if I was going to succeed. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Each day that passed brought me closer to my goal, closer to exposing their lies, closer to reclaiming my freedom. I could almost taste the victory, the satisfaction of seeing their world crumble around them. But I knew that I couldn't afford to become complacent. I had to remain focused, disciplined, and above all, patient. The strike had to be precise, calculated, and perfectly timed. The day they tried to take away my dreams was the day they made their biggest mistake. They had underestimated me, underestimated my resilience, underestimated my determination to fight for my own life. They thought they could control me, manipulate me, and break me, but they were wrong. I was about to show them just how wrong they were. The evidence I needed arrived unexpectedly, almost falling into my lap. My brother, fueled by arrogance and too much champagne at a family gala, began bragging about a recent investment opportunity his father had let him in on. He detailed how they were manipulating stock prices, using insider information to make a killing. The crimson drained from my face, not from fear, but from a chilling realization. This was bigger than I thought. It wasn't just about defrauding investors. It was about systemic corruption, about ruining lives on a massive scale. He even showed me the trading platform they were using, a clandestine website accessible only through a series of encrypted passwords. That was their mistake. That's when I knew I had them. Feigning excitement, I peppered him with questions, meticulously memorizing the website address, the login credentials, every single detail he carelessly divulged. He ate it up, basking in my feigned admiration, completely oblivious to the fact that he was handing me the keys to their downfall. That night, after they were asleep, I crept into his room, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was silent, every creak of the floorboards amplified in the darkness. I located his laptop, the one he used for his legal studies, and carefully copied the trading platform software onto a USB drive. It was a risky move, but I knew that it was necessary. I needed to have access to their accounts, to their trades, to their entire operation if I was going to expose them. Back in my room, I worked through the night, bypassing their security measures, cracking their passwords, and gaining access to their illicit world. What I found was sickening. Millions of dollars changing hands, shell corporations, offshore accounts, a web of deceit that stretched across continents. I documented everything, meticulously gathering evidence, building an airtight case that would leave them no room to maneuver. Now that I had the means, the game was about to change. The trap had to be perfect. Simply turning over the evidence to the authorities wouldn't be enough. My parents were powerful, influential, and they had connections in all the right places. They would deny everything, they would discredit me, and they would find a way to walk away unscathed. I needed to orchestrate a public takedown, a spectacle that would expose their corruption for the world to see, leaving them no chance of escape. The annual charity gala was their biggest event, a lavish affair attended by the city's elite, a gathering of politicians, business leaders, and socialites. It was the perfect stage for my grand reveal. I spent weeks planning the event, meticulously crafting a presentation that would lay bare their crimes, their lies, their hypocrisy. I secured a spot on the program, ostensibly to present a donation on behalf of the family, but in reality, I was planning to deliver a devastating blow. I knew that they would be suspicious, that they would try to stop me, but I had anticipated their every move. I enlisted the help of my sympathetic family friend, the paralegal, who provided me with legal advice and helped me navigate the complexities of corporate law. I also reached out to an investigative journalist, a fearless reporter known for her work exposing corruption and holding the powerful accountable. She was hesitant at first, skeptical of my claims, but after reviewing the evidence I had gathered, she was convinced. She agreed to help me to publish the story to amplify my voice and ensure that the truth would be heard. The tension in the house was palpable. My parents were growing increasingly suspicious, sensing that something was amiss. They watched my every move, questioned my every action, their eyes narrowed with suspicion. I played my part perfectly, acting the dutiful daughter, attending their social events, nodding attentively during their lectures, all while secretly preparing for their downfall. The day of the gala arrived, and I could barely contain my excitement. The air was thick with anticipation, a mix of excitement and dread. I dressed in a stunning gown, a symbol of my newfound power, my transformation from victim to victor. As I walked into the ballroom, I could feel their eyes on me, their gazes filled with a mixture of pride and unease. They knew that something was coming, but they had no idea what was in store for them. As I stood on the stage, the microphone in my hand, I looked out at the audience, their faces a sea of anticipation. My parents were sitting in the front row, their smiles strained, their eyes filled with a mixture of pride and apprehension. I took a deep breath and began to speak. "Tonight," I said, my voice ringing out through the ballroom, "I'm not here to present a donation. I'm here to expose a crime." "Tonight," I said, my voice ringing out through the ballroom, "I'm not here to present a donation. I'm here to expose a crime." The room went silent. Every head turned, every conversation ceased. My parents' faces morphed from strained smiles to masks of confusion and dawning horror. For years, my family has built a reputation on lies, on deceit, on the backs of hardworking people they've systematically defrauded. My father, I paused, letting the word hang in the air like a curse, is not the philanthropist you see before you. He is a thief, a manipulator, and a criminal. A collective gasp swept through the room. My mother rose halfway from her seat, her hand clutched at her throat, her eyes wide with disbelief. My brother sat frozen, his face pale, his mouth agape. I gestured to the large screen behind me, and the journalist I contacted triggered the presentation. A series of slides appeared, each one a damning piece of evidence. Bank statements showing illegal transfers, emails outlining fraudulent schemes, photographs of secret meetings with shady individuals. The trading platform software, now projected on the screen, displayed their illicit trades, the stock prices they had manipulated, the fortunes they had stolen. As each piece of evidence flashed before their eyes, the color drained from my parents' faces. Their carefully constructed facade began to crumble, revealing the ugly truth that lay beneath. "This," I said, my voice unwavering, "is the reality of the family name legacy. A legacy built on greed, on corruption, on the exploitation of others." The room erupted in chaos. People were shouting, whispering, pointing, their faces a mixture of shock, disgust, and disbelief. My parents were surrounded by a sea of horrified faces, their reputation, their status, their entire world collapsing around them. My father tried to rush the stage, his face contorted with rage, but security guards intervened, holding him back. My mother sank back into her seat, her face buried in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. My brother simply stared blankly ahead, his eyes devoid of all emotion. The journalist, true to her word, released the story to the press, and within minutes, the ballroom was swarming with reporters, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in my face. I answered their questions calmly, concisely, providing them with additional details, reinforcing the evidence, ensuring that the truth would be heard. The police arrived soon after, and my father was taken into custody, his empire crumbling before his very eyes. My mother and brother were left to face the wreckage, their lives irrevocably shattered. The fallout was swift and brutal. My father's business was seized, his assets frozen, his reputation destroyed. He faced multiple charges, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. My brother, implicated in the scheme, was disbarred and faced his own legal troubles. My mother, stripped of her wealth and her social standing, became a pariah, shunned by her former friends and allies. Their carefully constructed world, the world they had so ruthlessly protected, was reduced to ashes. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of detached satisfaction washing over me. I had done what I set out to do. I had exposed their lies, reclaimed my life, and brought them to justice. It wasn't easy. It cost me my family, my home, my sense of security, but it was worth it. I had finally broken free from their control, and I was finally free to live my own life. I walked away from the wreckage, leaving them to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. I didn't feel joy, I didn't feel triumph, I just felt empty. The anger that had fueled me for so long had finally dissipated, leaving behind a void that I knew would take time to fill. But I also felt a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. I was finally in control of my own destiny, and I was determined to make the most of it. They lost everything, I just smiled. Revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.